Hey guys, welcome to 1832 West Spruce in Chandler, Arizona. I'm Pace Morby, and this is Aram
Perrin.
Aram Perrin. She is the real estate agent that sold this house to me, and we actually utilize subject to and seller finance, what we call a hybrid strategy. And Aram, I don't know how much you made. How much did you make on this deal?
Almost $29,000.
Almost $29,000. So a little over $28,000, which is pretty amazing. Did you structure the commissions on this deal, or was it just in your listing agreement? How did that work out?
It was in my listing agreement. So 2% for the seller, 2% for the buyer.
Amazing. So you ended up making 4% total.
Correct.
Amazing. So that's a tip for any real estate agent out there that is watching this video. The great thing about being the listing agent and working with an investor on a deal like this is that she was able to represent both parties. Is that called dual agency, right?
It was, but I didn't.
But you didn't.
I didn't do dual agency. I just represented the seller.
Okay, love it. So for me, I look at a deal like that, and I'm so happy when an agent makes money on a deal like this. Most people would try and claw back or negotiate their commissions. I want you to make a ton of money on these types of deals. So this was listed. How long was it listed?
It wasn't listed. It was pre-MLS.
It's pre-MLS. And so
Yes.
why did an investor end up getting involved with you?
I put it in our brokerage website.
Okay.
And basically asked if anybody was interested before putting it on the market, because we didn't want to do all the renovations and all the work because the seller just didn't want to put the finances in.
Okay, got it. So a lot of people ask the question, why would a seller sell to you on subject to? Why would a seller sell to you on seller finance? And this helped the seller with their situation, right?
Definitely, yes.
How did it help?
Well, the fact that we didn't have to pour money in and make sure that he wouldn't be able to get it back after the fact. So his finances were at a place where he couldn't, pour $150,000 into the home to make it upgraded like everywhere else was.
Right. And then he also, we'll never say the seller's name on this deal, but the seller, in my opinion, just wanted too much money.
Yes and no. I mean, at the price that we were going to list it at, it was supposed to be once it's fixed and gone through.
Yeah.
But and then as the market changed right in the middle of what everybody was doing, it got a little bit more difficult to list it higher than what he wanted.
Yeah.
And therefore we kind of brought it lower to be able to kind of get what he wanted at the same time as get it fixed.
Yeah, so what I see in a lot of situations, especially right now where like interest rates went from 3% upwards of 6% in a matter of 4 months.
Yes.
What happens is the buyers have they have a lack of affordability, and so they're going to lowball, or a house like this, which is a really expensive house in a really nice area, you're just not going to get offers on a house at that price unless you drop it way down, because people just looking at interest rates are like, I can't afford that house.
Correct.
So a creative finance solution subject to and seller finance came in and solved that problem in minutes, essentially.
Yes.
We're going to get to the nasty part of this. So the nasty part of this is that I wasn't the first person that saw this deal. In fact, this deal was brought to me by a wholesaler that didn't quite know how to structure the deal. And so I want to kind of talk through that journey and the problems that you had to go through in order to get to somebody who's a credible buyer.
Yes. So I listed.
And hold nothing back, Aram.
I'll try. So I had an agent from our brokerage let me know that she had an investor interested in this property, and basically that it was going to be a cash offer.
Okay.
So we brought them over, we talked about it, and then so from beginning to until I met you, the terms of what they wanted to do changed and changed and changed and changed. So basically, the other agent was completely over it and said, "This is not real. This is not actual things." And
So the other agent in your brokerage
Yes.
was representing a buyer.
yes.
The buyer kept going to that agent and saying, change it, change it.
So
change
it was a little more complicated because it was the agent, a lender, and the buyer. So we had the buyer was going through the lender talking to the agent talking to me.
This is funny because most people are like, oh, creative finance is challenging. Once it got to me, and we'll go through that journey. I'm sorry to cut you off. Once it got to me, it actually became incredibly easy.
Way easier. Yes.
Way easier.
Way
so,
easier.
Guys, subject to and seller finance is actually way easier in those circumstances. A cash transaction that required a lender to come in and provide the funds for that buyer actually created layers upon layers of problems and communication, and they had to keep coming back and renegotiating with you guys even after you guys probably almost were like meeting on an agreement, right?
Well, no, because the terms just kept changing.
So you never even got to
I
the
never
point.
no. So we started in May, and
Guys, it's right now. It's almost September.
so we just closed. So it's just almost 2.5 months.
Yeah.
I was negotiating and going back and forth in emails and trying to figure out. Basically, I never got a contract signed. So when it fell apart, it was kind of like, obviously, it just.
I honestly feel like, so my wife's a real estate agent, and I feel like that, like what you went through is actually the hardest part about being a real estate agent, is because an agent doesn't get paid until the deal closes.
Correct.
And so what happens is like a lot of agents will, not you, because you've worked with wholesalers,
Yes.
you've worked with now creative finance buyers, and you've worked with investors, so you know both sides of the coin. But the agents that don't work with investors and they are only really working with cash buyers, they don't realize how much time and energy they're spending on a deal. 2.5 months.
Yes, daily. And my seller was out of the country.
These are the, so like,
So
so her seller's out of the country. She's got a buyer that keeps, I will be soft in this, but fiddling around, messing around. Part of it probably was them. The other part of it was their lender, who was looking at the deal and saying, well, I'll give you this much money. Who knows what was going on there. But my wife, as she was a buyer's agent and a listing agent for a long time, she would come home at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and her job was not over.
Mm-hmm.
It was like you're laying in bed texting people, negotiating people. You're trying to hang out with your kids,
Right.
case in point, trying to do everything else. And what ends up happening is you're sitting there negotiating on a deal that you're just like, are you kidding me? How are we 2.5 months into negotiating this deal? And then the deal never actually becomes a deal.
No, it actually doesn't even close. So
And you make $0. Guys, if you're not allowing an investor to work on these types of deals that has either a creative solution or maybe hard money, because hard money would have just closed on the deal. Where they trying to get a conventional loan is
honestly, I don't know. I don't know
2.5
what they were
months.
trying to do.
2.5 months.
So like
is still
we
crazy.
were supposed to start with all cash. So I said to my seller, oh, this is going to be easy. Cash, we're done in 7-10 days.
Good
and-
job, baby.
That was the whole idea.
Yeah.
But then they're like, are they open to creative financing, seller carry? I said, well, let me talk to him. I mean, it just, honestly, it went back and forth so many times. He had so many questions.
Yeah.
So if I showed you the emails of my questions to them
Yeah.
that didn't get answered.
Love it. Okay, so
So-
finally, what ended up happening is your cash buyer, who started out with cash, played around with their lender. Their lender kept coming back and negotiating 2.5 months later. They then, at some point, actually started pitching creative finance to you guys.
No, it didn't take very long. No, it didn't take that long. No,
Okay,
it
so
just
they
didn't close until it didn't close at all after 2.5 months.
Okay, so
But-
they
so-
started pitching Subto seller finance. Your seller says, "Okay, well, I'm interested,
Yes.
but I've got a list of questions." So you take those questions, you start emailing the investor, and you never got answers on that.
No. And then,
Do you remember some of those questions? Like, how does subject to work?
yeah, well, what is it? Why? How does it work? How does the balloon payment work? How does, when does it get paid off? I mean, there's so many
Right.
many questions. And basically, I was told that the TC would respond and give
TC
me,
is transaction coordinator, guys.
that would give me the answers. Well,
The
the
TC was going to
TC
give you an answer about how they're structuring
how
their
that
deal?
they were supposed to be
Have you ever
answered.
known a TC that knows how to structure
I
deals?
don't.
I don't either.
So- but then, so something came up with the first buyer,
Okay.
and she or
She had a family situation.
Yes, so we got turned over to another buyer.
Okay.
The other buyer came in, answered the questions, changed the terms, renegotiated, redid all of it, and basically at that point, after weeks on end, we finally got to a point where everybody understood and everybody was on the same page, and my seller got an attorney so that we could make sure just everything was correct.
Yeah.
He did that, and basically we were supposed to sign on Monday, and the deal fell apart. And he
Do you
called
know
and
why the
said,
deal fell apart?
he said that it was just
Not a good deal.
not a good deal, and they can't afford to do what he wanted and to pay for the house and all the other things that they had to get done.
So here's a couple of pieces of advice for you if you're a real estate investor. Guys, agents don't get paid unless the deal actually closes. And so for me, you want to go back inside? Okay, hold on. Think about what you're doing to a real estate agent when you guys are screwing around with people's time and energy. You want to build credible relationships with people. Like, would you do another deal with me?
Absolutely.
Would you want to go through what you did with the previous buyers?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So really key point. And I get a lot of investors that will say, why don't agents want to work with us? Like, do I really have to go into that? You guys wasted 3 months of somebody's life. The seller who owned the property at the time had to make multiple payments while you guys screw around with the agent and their commission, and the agent and their time, and the seller and their time, and the seller is paying property taxes, insurance, all sorts of things on the property while it's just sitting here waiting for you to get your act together. So if you are doing a great job as a real estate investor, you shouldn't have to ask the question of why is the real estate agent not wanting to work with me? So get a little bit more credible, or get a partner, somebody like me or somebody else that's doing a lot of deals in your local market, so you don't have to do this to people in their timeline. You were being patient through the whole thing though, right?
Yes. I mean, I think so.
You were probably going home and being like, oh my gosh, like freaking.
Well, it was more my family that was like, when are you going to get off the phone? When are you going to get off the phone?
Right.
I was either at my desk or on the phone with the seller or emailing or talking to the buyers. So it was a long process, but.
Do you feel like, because I know so we bought the deal subject to, so we took over the existing mortgage.
Correct.
Was there a moment where the investor could have explained that better to you and your client?
Oh, absolutely. I think in the beginning where those questions were is if I would have just gotten answers, I mean, we would wait a week.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't get anything. And we'd wait and it's like, okay, we're getting to you. Okay, well, I need to get moving because obviously the market was shifting.
Right.
It's summertime, so the longer you sit on the house, the longer it's gonna not go.
Plus your seller was out of the country.
Yes, so he left pretty much, I think when you took over is when he was completely gone, because he was in and out. And then he was on the opposite side of the world, so completely different hours of what we had. So we had to wait for him to wake up to be able to connect with him, to be able to respond back. I mean, it was a little difficult.
What would in that moment, now that you've done a subject to deal, one, if a real estate agent is watching this now, I know you said outside that subject to and seller finance actually was easier than the cash portion of the transaction. Like once it got to me, it was just like boom. And we had our problems because I have 4 people that run my transactions. I have a title and escrow officer, I have a transaction coordinator, I have an operations manager, and I have a bookkeeper that run my life.
And a TC.
And yeah, and so I push everything over to them, and I go, hey, I want to buy this deal, and then I go and start looking for the next deal. Meanwhile, I could have done a better job introducing my whole team to you and said, hey, here's everybody in my team. You're going to hear from everybody because Tony has to send the wires, Molly has to verify everything, Allison's my transaction coordinator, Danielle is my escrow officer, and
Danielle had her own team.
And Danielle had Jennifer, her own team, and probably her own secretary. So you probably had 7 people on my side communicating with you. So you went from like lack of communication to overwhelming amount of communication, but
trying to get everybody on the same page.
Right.
Yes.
And we probably could have done a better job on our side of just putting everybody in one email and said, hey, here's everybody party to the transaction.
But my TC did that for you.
You did? Okay,
My TC
perfect.
did.
So Thank you for that. So if somebody asked you, like another real estate agent asked, what is subject to? How did that all work? I don't understand how that works. How would you explain that to another real estate agent?
Can we have a minute?
Sure.
I just, I guess I'm not completely 100% still.
Perfect.
But it was difficult because when I would ask these questions, I wouldn't get a straight answer.
Right.
So I still really don't understand because they would tell me that they had their own.
Do you want me to explain it to you? Because I'd love to.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, they would just tell me, my TC or, our title company will take care of it. But what are they taking care of? Because obviously I'm a real estate agent and I need to have certain forms to give to my brokerage. So I can't just go off of any forms.
Right.
But I kept requesting these forms so I can see them to see what they're talking about. Never got these forms.
Is there a part of subject to that you are cloudy on?
Well, the whole thing. I get what we did,
right.
But at the same time, it still went through our contracts.
Right.
So it's still, yes, seller financing through what we did. So I know like that portion of it.
Right.
But obviously we went through the lawyer to make sure everything was stated correctly just because I didn't understand it.
Right, because it was your first time doing a subject
and
to.
I didn't want to be responsible for something I didn't understand.
Of course, and subject to and even seller finance is not something that they teach in real estate school.
Not at all.
In fact, I would say that most real estate agents I know have never done a seller finance deal.
I had never done it. And I asked even my own TC and she's like, I only do a few here and there and I just fill out the paperwork that they give me.
So what I find is that most of the agents start fragmenting in the business. So like you'll get buyer's agents on retail, you'll get listing agents on retail, you'll get agents that are on commercial, you'll get agents that go do like, multifamily and all that kind of stuff. And people start fragmenting. And then there's agents that really focus on seller finance and creative finance structures, and their TCs are obviously with them. So what happens is when you get an agent who's like, hey, I'm typically doing residential buyers, sellers, conventional loans, all that kind of stuff. I've never interfaced with this. Sometimes somebody could be in business 10, 15 years in real estate and never even have heard of subject
Well, that
to.
was another thing. We spoke with a lady who only does seller financing.
Oh, love it.
And
okay.
she said, this is very fishy.
Why did she say that?
Everything that I was getting the
because
answers
of the lack of communication.
Yeah, so whatever I would tell her.
You would ask for a question, you wouldn't get the answer.
She was like, this doesn't seem right, this doesn't sound right. I wouldn't do it. I would back away, just say no. I'm like, okay, so it was very difficult to trust.
Right.
Obviously, going through the process, I'm like, as long as my seller was okay with it.
Right.
I was fine.
So you ended up you had a real estate attorney verify the contracts. You talked to another lady at Seller Finance. I'm sure you guys ended up talking to the escrow officer about everything we were doing. So everything ended up amazing.
Obviously working well, yes.
Working well. So the way that we did the deal is, for everybody paying attention, is we did a portion of the purchase was subject to, which means, do you remember his bank name, the name of the bank that we took over the loan?
Penny Mac.
Okay, so the seller has a loan with Penny Mac. That's who's currently servicing the loan. Instead of us paying off the loan, we just make a payment towards that loan now.
Correct.
Okay, and then the seller finance portion, I can't remember what it is, but it's 0% seller finance. I think I paid him $50,000 up front.
Up front for the interest.
You're right. So the way I structured the deal is I was like, I want 0% interest on this deal. And so I paid the interest up front is the way I structured the deal.
Yes.
So what's currently remaining, do you remember how much equity is remaining, ballpark?
$280.
Okay, so $280,000. So the seller sold the house to me for $730,000.
Correct.
$730,000. About $450,000 of that is the Penny Mac loan that I did not pay off. Instead, I make a monthly payment to Penny Mac, just the same way the seller was making that payment, and I never paid off that loan. And a lot of people are really confused by this because they don't realize that the deed and the note, or the deed of trust, this is really confusing about real estate. The deed and the deed of trust. And people don't understand that these are two completely different things. So the deed is who owns the property, and the deed of trust is the debt agreement, who owes money on the property. So the deed of trust is held by Penny Mac.
Yes.
And then your seller and I created a second deed of trust for his seller finance equity.
Correct.
And then the deed got transferred to my name.
Yes.
Okay, so I took over a Penny Mac loan at 500 something thousand. Do you remember the interest rate?
380. It's like almost three something.
3%?
Yeah.
Okay, so I took
High.
over a loan at 3%. So you guys can see the value for me is that right now, if I went out and I got a
More than
loan,
6%.
I'd be at 6%.
Right.
So this is a great deal for me. I took over a Penny Mac loan at 3 something percent. And then the seller gave me the remaining equity in 0% seller finance, which is great. So it's a great deal for me. Amazing deal for you. You ended up making around $29,000.
Correct.
So you got 4% on the deal.
Correct.
This is a thing that people don't understand as they go, can agents get paid on creative finance deals?
Why not? I did.
Right, and you got paid, but did you get paid through, did I pay you or did the title company pay you?
The title company paid me.
Okay, so this is another thing that I think agents don't understand is that we're going through a closing attorney, typically. Arizona is not a closing attorney state. But in other states like Georgia or Florida, sometimes Texas, we'll go through a closing attorney or we'll go through an escrow officer or a title company here locally. How was that experience with the title company?
Really good. Really good. They were on top of it. They would answer the questions. Anytime I needed to get a hold of her, she was available, or I would text her. So, and even my seller really got to know her well. And that felt a little weird for me because usually sellers don't really deal with the escrow. Your agent does. And if there's a question or whatever, you go through that.
Why did my agent talk to your seller? Was it because we needed to know the mortgage information?
Well, that too. But I gave him stuff. I think he had questions and she was used to dealing with the sellers.
Yeah.
So she said, I just called him and if
Amazing.
he had any questions, I would answer.
So here's a quick tip for anybody that's trying to do creative finance. Make sure you're going through a title and escrow officer or a closing attorney that actually is doing these types of transactions. You can see that our title company obviously does this a lot.
Yes.
And so they were able to just get on the phone with your seller and say, hey, this is how it works. This is what we're doing. Hey, I need your mortgage information. Made your job easy because this was your first subject to deal.
Correct. And she answered all of his questions. So if he had something that obviously I didn't know, she was there to respond.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions I'll ask you just from like people that are just learning how to do this. I'll ask that in a second. But my question is, once I got involved, what were the problems you had with me?
I think just the process of the contract was the hardest thing.
Was that because we had to get the attorney involved, or what was that?
No, just trying to figure out what we had to put in the contract, what wasn't required to put in the contract, but because obviously they're going through a real estate agent with the forms that we have to have.
So what we ended up doing is we ended up using your guys' purchase contract.
Correct.
So instead of using my purchase contract, this is another tip for you guys. If the real estate agent that you're doing a deal with on subject to or seller finance wants to use their real estate contract.
Well, we don't have a choice.
There you go.
We have to have the actual
People
form.
need to understand this.
Yes.
Is because we provide contracts to our students, people nationwide, and they go, Pace, the agent won't take my contract. I'm like, they're not allowed to use your contract.
Yes.
And then they go, well, what's the contract for? I'm like, when you're talking to a seller directly.
Correct.
Right? When you don't have a real estate agent. So when you're going through a real estate agent, the real estate agent and you need to work through their contracts in your local state. What do you guys call that contract? It's the
AAR form.
The AAR forms. So we had to go through your contract.
Yes.
And so you and Molly, my COO, ended up going through that a couple of times until we got to where we needed to be.
Correct.
Once we got past that, what was the other problems that we had?
I don't think we had any more problems.
Besides
once it was signed and it went through escrow, really that was the official until the signing.
All the way up until we closed escrow, were you like, this is
I didn't think it
scam?
was a scam. I just didn't trust it anymore after the first and the second.
It was like the boy who cried wolf. It was like,
is this really going to happen?
Right.
Since, the second one failed to close, it felt more like, do I really want to put my seller through this one more time?
Yeah.
But when I brought it again to him and he's like, yeah, I'll I'll see what they say. I was more shocked that he would even be considering, but he did, and I
Well,
mean, it was
kudos
to
to
his
you.
benefit to do it anyway. So
Right, but kudos to you that you didn't give up either. Because most real estate agents would have looked at that and go, okay, well, I'm working with 2 novice investors that don't know what they're doing, and they can't even get me an answer for a week, sometimes not even giving you an answer at all, saying that their transaction coordinator is going to give them the answer. They don't get the answer to you, and you still were working with them trying to say, come on, guys, like, are we going to get this deal done?
correct.
You get all the way to a point where somebody's going to sign a contract, and then they call you and go, it's not a good deal.
Correct.
It's like, then why did you freaking send me the numbers that you sent me?
And that was our biggest thing, is why are we getting, you know, we got this number, then we got this number, then, I mean, it just kept changing, and we're like, okay, and I kept going back and saying, this is what they want to do. He's like, okay. I mean, he was really, my seller was, I think, very open
And patient.
to be able to entertain what was going on. But I think for me, obviously, time is of the essence, and we wanted to close it as soon as possible because he wanted to leave country.
What's interesting about this deal is, like, if you guys look at a real estate agent, okay, in this situation, if I was with, like, if my wife was working on this transaction, I would have told my wife to quit after 30 days. I really would have.
Really?
Well, because my wife will bring these things home, and she'd be on the phone just like you were on the phone, and I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, that buyer obviously is not credible. So, but I've also made my entire business has been picking up the broken pieces from a novice investor. Like the last 5-6 years, I'm actually going to investors. I go, what kind of problems do you have that I can solve because you don't know how to piece this together? So I don't mind it, but on the real estate agent side, I feel horrible for the real estate agent because you go May, April, June, July, August. You're basically almost 6 months
Working.
working. And it wasn't like one call a week.
Oh no. It was every day.
It was every
It was
day for
every
6
day.
months. So when somebody says, well, I made $29,000 on a transaction, the way I look at that as a business owner, I go, that's $29,000 for 6 months worth of work.
Correct. And before that.
And before that.
Because he was going to rent it out first. So, I mean, I've been through a lot more than just this. So, I mean, it was supposed to be a rental, so I don't like to do rentals. So I gave it to one of my own real estate agents to do a rental. She spent a couple of weeks on it.
Why don't you like rental? I know the answer. Why?
I don't deal with rentals.
There's no money in it, guys.
And there's a lot of work.
My wife was a rental agent for a year, and we look at her P&L, and I was like, dude, you literally paid 10 grand to be an agent this year.
Exactly.
You spend
pay
so
more
much
money,
time to make like $200 on somebody's lease, and you're like, wait, you just showed this person rentals for 2 weeks straight, and you made $200. It's I don't know why they do that in the rental world.
I don't know, because you do a lot more work.
It's
because
crazy.
You're driving around showing. I mean, you do the same thing as you're buying, but at the same time, the renters aren't hooked up to you by anything.
Right.
So, like, I would drive to Scottsdale to show a property, and they wouldn't even show up. So it's like, I just drove from Queen Creek to Scottsdale to show a rental
For $200.
If they close, you know, if they don't close, you obviously don't get paid. So,
Okay, so a couple of questions for an agent. If an agent is having a challenging time with maybe a listing, or the seller doesn't want to go on market, is subject to and seller finance with a credible buyer, was it a pretty easy process?
I would say yes.
Was it actually
as long as the
easier?
communication is there, I think it's fine.
Okay, but we didn't have an appraisal.
No, we did not.
We had no real inspection.
No, we did not.
I met you here and we just made jokes about Hawaii.
Yes.
Right? So I didn't have an inspector. I didn't hire an inspector. I didn't come back and beat you guys up on price.
No.
We set our price. Did I come back and try and renegotiate with you after I signed the contract?
No.
You probably thought I was going to.
I didn't know. Like, I didn't know anything.
For all of you investors out there making my life really easy, thank you so much. Keep screwing up. I'll just keep buying the deals with the real estate agent. So do you think that going back into previous years of being a real estate agent, that subject to and seller finance would have actually helped you make more money if you had to start employing this a little bit more frequently?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Well, have you ever had a listing where a seller didn't get the number that they wanted that they probably would? No. Well,
I haven't.
Really?
Never.
Is it because you're telling? So this is something that agents do really. Investors are really bad. I think we've established this. Agents, in my opinion, in a lot of my experience, they'll tell their seller whatever the hell the seller wants to sell the property for. They'll go, oh yeah, I can sell it.
I don't say that.
That's why your houses sell.
Yeah, no, I make sure I do my job.
Have you lost listings because of that?
No.
So
No,
you just,
because I put them on the market and they go. They just.
but you're doing it at the right number.
Right.
If a seller says, you go, the house is worth 300 on the market, and the seller says, I think I want to list it for 350, would you list that property?
I would list it, but I would also let them know that it's probably not going to sell.
Okay, love it.
I mean, you have to let them know to have that expectation. Because if they don't know, I mean, I have a neighbor right now that they put their home on the market for 1.5 million.
Right.
There's nothing in our area that goes for 1.5 million, especially because it's not upgraded. So you can't look at homes in the area and say, oh, my home's worth 1.5. No, your home is worth something, but definitely not 1.5.
Your home
They've
is
been sitting on the market for 6 months. So it's like,
Have they lowered the price?
a few thousand, yeah. But I mean, it's like you
A
gotta.
few thousand off
yeah.
of 1.5? Can you say
It's
delirious?
not. Well, I mean, I told him when I saw him, I said, it's a little too high.
He's
for
like,
what
well, that's why I didn't have you list the property.
No, no, but
Because I want somebody to lie. I want somebody to lie to me.
But
basically.
I think that because everything was going right before, right? Everything was flying off the shelves. But now that obviously everything's slowed down and everything's going, everyone's actually looking for, hey, your property's not upgraded. It's not worth me paying 6% on
Right.
this property that I have to come back and fix.
Here's a couple of good, simple, like first base, super simple questions.
Okay.
Because of creative finance, were we able to pay more money than the seller was expecting on the market?
Absolutely.
Okay. What did we pay full asking price, or did we try and negotiate and beat you guys up?
Full asking price.
Full asking price. What is the most effective way to propose creative finance to an option or to an agent without scaring them off? Do you have anything off the top of your head that would help somebody?
I think as long as you give them the numbers and explain to them how it works, especially if they've never done it before.
Right.
And like I asked for your contract to see what you guys offer or how it works, send them the contract,
Right.
at least review it. I think that would be the biggest.
This is a side question, but investors, I'm sorry to say this, investors are knuckleheads, and they commonly ask me a question of, how do I go around the real estate agent and just talk to the seller directly?
Don't.
Don't. You're a jackass if you do that.
Yes.
Okay. How did I sell creative finance to you?
How did you
Your
sell it?
your seller was actually already sold on creative finance before
Yes.
I came in and structured it properly.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, they was just asked, are they open to this kind of deal?
What would be the best way to convince agents into talking to their seller about going into creative finance?
Just showing them what they're gonna make, how much they're gonna get. Or like he was gonna get a monthly paycheck,
Right.
which he loved. 'Cause
That got him excited about
that
the
got
deal.
him excited that, I don't have to deal with the loan and I still get a paycheck, even though obviously it's not the whole thing at the same time.
Right.
But because he was gonna rent it out anyway, he'd still be paying the loan and he'd still be paying for, or the renters would be paying him.
Through creative finance, did I upgrade him from the landlord to the lender?
Yes,
And he was way happier about that.
yes.
Because he
Because he
doesn't
doesn't have to deal with the property anymore.
but he still makes money.
Correct.
Okay, cool. What are some reasons that somebody might think Subto is a scam?
Not getting their answers. I think that's the biggest thing is not getting what they're asking for.
Okay.
So-
Meaning, going back into the story, guys, the two investors that pitched creative finance to this real estate agent didn't give her answers for weeks on end or give her answers at all. Okay. Ask for her number so she can send me deals. Okay, did your brokerage get a split of your commission, or are you at 100% brokerage?
I'm 100%. I give them a fee.
Like a flat fee, like $250 or
yeah, $300.
Okay. So what's your brokerage?
My home group.
Okay, my home group. Cool. So a lot of people don't understand this. Real estate investors don't understand that agents who are a little bit more experienced that are like, look, I need like very little involvement from my broker. They're not typically giving a split to their broker anymore. They do that maybe in the beginning just to kind of get their
correct
momentum.
That's what I did. I started with my home group. I left just because I was so new and I had no idea what I was doing to Century 21. And then I learned everything in Century 21, came back to my home group.
Because my home group was 100%, but they also give you very little support, if any.
Oh, no. They give you a lot of support.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yeah. They gave
at
you
100%?
Yes, they do.
Why did you leave them?
Because
you didn't know what you were doing.
I needed the hand holding.
I see.
And
Century 21 took a portion of your split to hold your hand.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So.
Okay. Somebody asked, can you use creative finance for short-term rentals? Of course you can. Here's a great one. This is a common one. Why do real estate agents think that investors are the enemy?
I don't think so.
It's because you've worked with real estate investors. Do you have other agents maybe in your brokerage that don't enjoy working with real estate investors?
I have one for sure, the one that was working with me on this deal.
She just got fed up with it.
She was done with it, yes.
So it sounds like the novice investors, probably a lot more wholesalers than anybody else, because what is happening is wholesalers who are trying to jump into the real estate game, they don't have any real money, they don't really even have a buyer tied up, and what they're doing
and that's I think the most frustrating is the wholesalers when which I've worked with wholesalers before, and they try to get the buyer by the end of the closing so that they can get paid, and they do this. So
and you don't have a problem with that. It's just
I don't mind it, but it's hard to do a contract based on you don't know who
the actual buyer
close. Yeah,
right.
so it starts with one, and then it kind of shifts to different people until they find the right one that's actually going to take it.
What I always tell my students and other people is I say, go find your buyer first before, like, it's okay to negotiate and talk to an agent. Like if I went to you and I said, hey Aram, my name's Pace, I'm actually a wholesaler. I have 15 buyers that I want to float this idea by or this deal by. Would you be okay with a price around 200? And you go, if you said, yeah, we'd be okay. I'd say, great, I'm gonna go see if 200 will work for my buyers, and I'll come back to you when I have a buyer that is ready to move forward into a contract.
Absolutely.
I don't put agents and sellers into contracts unless I know who my buyer is going to be, because again, you waste that relationship. Where like the two people that worked with you before probably are never gonna do a deal with you. You and I are probably gonna do deals together, probably in Hawaii.
Yes.
But we'll end up doing more deals together because now we have a relationship.
Right.
Right, and you know my team, it makes it easy. When somebody comes to you and now they have a listing that maybe is like this, you're like, oh, who are you gonna think of?
I would just call you and let you know.
Right? Okay. Ooh, this is a good one. I like this one, the simplicity of this question. What's a few takeaways from this experience regarding creative finance?
Takeaways as in what did I learn?
Yeah, like you obviously learned what subject to is.
Subject to is, correct.
You learned that you can actually let somebody take over payments on somebody's house.
Yes. And I think that was the hardest thing, is because he was so scared that the lender would find out.
Okay.
And then you'd have to pay for the whole, and he didn't know what that outcome would be.
And so that probably was one of the questions that the previous investors didn't explain properly.
Correct. And that's why we made sure we had a lawyer, because I had no idea. And that was one thing I learned, that once the lawyer got involved and said, oh yeah, this is how you do it. Like for me, that gave me more confidence.
Do you remember the name of your attorney?
I just remember her name's Jessie.
Jessie. Will you connect me with Jessie?
Yes.
I have my own attorney, Sean St. Clair, here local in Phoenix, that does a lot of stuff, but I'd love to get to know Jessie if you don't mind. Because the more attorneys that understand creative finance, the better I think is for everybody. So your big takeaway was hearing the credibility from an actual real estate attorney that was like, oh yeah, this is easy.
Well,
this is
when we started, it was, we're going to keep it in his name because, of this and this and this. And what if this comes up? What if this insurance? What if someone gets hurt? I mean, like I said, there was so many questions that if this was into an Airbnb, what would happen?
Right.
So I think once talking to the attorney and understanding what he was telling me before
Was
and
actually
saying
real.
was actually real, I'm like, okay, so now do we go back to what he was saying, because it obviously it's lining up. So it gave more credit to the buyer at that point for me to feel like, okay, they are doing this the correct way. I don't feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
I love that. So if you're a real estate agent, just understand that it's perfectly okay for you to go to a real estate attorney. Just make sure that that real estate attorney has actually done creative finance, because what I get is I get a lot of agents that go, I've never heard of Subto, it must be a scam. It's like, okay, well, it's okay to have that gut reaction, but
Right.
are there things that you run into in real estate, like every transaction, you're like, you learned something?
Oh, you learn something new every time.
Me-
I mean, I learned a lot throughout this one, but for sure.
Even in
every
20
time.
years, you're going to be doing real estate, and you're going to be
Correct.
learning stuff.
Something's going to come up that
Right.
I don't know.
And you didn't learn all of this in real estate school?
Absolutely not.
This is a funny
Did
thing
I
too.
learn anything in real estate school?
I didn't
No.
either. You know, so I went to real estate school and I was like, are they going to teach us how to like value a property?
They didn't teach us anything.
They teach you like land plotting, and they teach you a bunch of
Correct.
bullshit, just
Yeah.
FYI.
And they test you on everything that you don't do.
Is there anything from that test that you've ever done? I don't even think the legalities of like staying out of prison type of rules and all that kind of stuff of like how to do everything.
I mean, you have to be ethical, obviously.
Right.
But it's just, I honestly, you take the class, you take the test, and that's it.
And then
you
you
never look back at what you learned there.
Right, you have to rely on
Right.
either your brokerage or you have to rely on a deal that you're doing to actually teach you the lessons.
Correct. Yes.
So if you're a newer agent and you've not heard of seller finance, subject to have you ever done a novation agreement?
No.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to do a novation agreement with Aram and see if we can help her. Okay, a couple of last things. If you, this might be hard, and if you don't want to do it, just say I don't want to do it. If you had to explain what subject to is to a realtor friend, could you do it? Very simply.
Probably not simple.
Well, it's simple. I'll do it simple.
Okay.
And tell me if this is right. Her seller sold the house to me, let me take over the payments on the mortgage.
Correct.
Keep the mortgage in his name, and the deed gets transferred to me. So I'm the new owner of this property, but the original mortgage is still in the seller's name.
Correct. Yeah.
So I didn't have to go apply. Did you guys ever pull my credit? They didn't pull. Did you ever even look at my bank balance? Nobody checked my bank balance. Did you guys check my job history? By the way, this is common.
Yeah.
This is the thing that a lot of people are blown away by. Like your buyer I didn't have to go bring a lender to the table. I didn't have to get my credit checked. You didn't check my bank balance. You didn't check my tax records.
Which I probably should have.
No, nobody does. I mean, we do thousands of transactions like this all over the country are happening. No credit check, no appraisal, no inspection. These types of deals, after we got the contract signed, what was the biggest delay? Was there a delay in getting the deal closed?
Oh, well, the fact that they were out of the country. I think that was the only thing, and them not being able to sign because their power of attorney wasn't complete.
Okay, so if we didn't have the out of the country situation, how fast could we have closed?
Within a week?
Amazing. That's like
Yeah.
that's easier than a cash transaction.
Yes.
So guys, if you're
So
not,
it can be, but it wasn't.
it wasn't. We had a power of attorney and some other things, but
Yeah.
before I got involved, it was a nightmare.
It was a lot of work. for
Right.
sure.
So if you're a real estate investor, guys, and if you're using creative finance, make sure that you're communicating with your agent. They're not the enemy. And also, if you're a real estate agent and you're working with the real estate investor, we're not the enemy. You made $30,000. I'm going to make a lot of money on this deal. One, I bought the house subject to, which means that the Penny Mac loan stayed in place. Your seller's name is still on that Penny Mac loan.
Correct. Yeah.
I have the deed. I am the owner of that property, and the remaining equity in this property was sold to me on seller finance
Correct.
at 0% interest.
Well, you paid for it up front.
I paid for the interest up front. So the remaining note, do you remember last question, do you remember the remaining note, like ballpark, 200 and something thousand dollars?
Something, yeah.
So I paid for the interest up front with the seller, and the remaining balance of the loan with the seller of 200 and something thousand dollars is financed to me at 0% interest.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm doing on the house?
What are you doing on
Yeah, do you know what my exit strategy is? Amazing. She doesn't, and that's perfectly fine, because what do you care?
I don't.
You don't, because you don't care what anytime a buyer buys a deal from any of your clients, you don't care what they do. You just care that they fulfill the obligation, they honor the contract, and they close escrow on time.
Correct.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Okay.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're a real estate agent, please understand that Creative Finance will only help you in your endeavors. She had a real estate attorney check everything, Jesse. Maybe I'll even get to interview Jesse at some point. Was he pretty cool? I mean, some of it was like the name of, well, maybe
It's a girl.
Oh, it's a girl. Okay. Is she pretty cool?
I don't know.
You never had to talk to her?
Just on the phone a couple of times. That's it.
Okay, cool. So I'll end up interviewing Jesse probably about this transaction and other transactions as well. But if you're a real estate agent, please understand that subject to seller finance novation agreements, these types of transactions will only amplify your ability to make money and actually make your seller a lot more money. How much more money do you think your seller made selling to me than they did through a cash transaction? At least $100 grand.
At least.
At least $100 grand.
100,000. Yes.
And guess what? This was one of the easiest transactions I've done in the last 6 months.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know where my money came from? I just went to a private money lender. I'm literally into this deal, no money out of my pocket.
Wow.
So thank you guys.
That's nice.
See ya.